Ian, thank you. Paul Jones.
Well, I don't work with Lachlan, at least not directly. But I met Lachlan one year. The first time I met him, we were cleaning the walls of the squash courts, which is an annual ritual at the squash club. And Lachlan had organized the squirting material and the plastic to lay down on the floor. And he was up a ladder working away, and I was down in the other corner working away. And I think there were only the two of us, maybe Gerald Dolling was there as well. I sort of became aware after a while that Lachlan was sizing me up. And I thought, aye, what's going on here? But I sort of discovered that after that, Lachlan, he doesn't, he was always sort of careful. I don't know, maybe he had some bad experiences in Britain or elsewhere, but he was always sort of careful as to the kind of people that he let into his world. And I think that one of the things that he discovered when he came to Deep River was that he could actually let quite a lot of people into his world. And I know for a fact that he was very comfortable here. Sometimes he admitted to me that maybe he should have gone and taken that job in Berkeley. But then he would shake his head and he would say, no, I know it's better here. This morning or earlier on today, I was looking out the window at the river, and I noticed that it was actually, at that time, what Lachlan would have considered to be a perfect sailing day. The wind is warm, and he particularly liked it when the wind came directly across the river, because that meant he could do what he called a beam reach, which is actually the technical term, he's correct. And that meant that he could just put the tiller in one direction and just sail up the river without having to, for a long time, without having to do a lot of tapping or working. I remember those are the days that I remember Lachlan in the summer being his happiest and his most relaxed. Lachlan was a very interesting person. In fact, I think he was one of the most interesting people that I've ever met. Lachlan was never one into dumbing anything down. There was always a thought or thinking going on about most topics that you could imagine. And I'll illustrate a few. He used to come around to my house most Sundays, either with Ian or with somebody else, and we'd have barbecue lamb chops. It always had to be lamb chops, and it was always the same, but that's the way he liked it. And I remember one of the conversations we had about that was, and it came out of nowhere, and it wasn't something that I'd been thinking about for a long time, but it was to do with copyright law. And Lachlan had very strong opinions on copyright law, and when copyrights should expire, and when was a reasonable time for them to expire. And I think it was him that told me that the Australian song, Waltzing Matilda, was actually copyrighted in the United States as an original composition in 1941, and that being in the United States, the copyright was still extant. And in fact, the Australian government had to pay royalties when they used that anthem in the Atlanta Olympic Games, I think. And I remember Lachlan looking at me and saying, a Matilda's a backpack. Who would know what American would know what a backpack was? Or a billabong's a lake. Who would know, American would know what a lake was? This is absolutely ridiculous. But that was Lachlan. He developed sort of fascinations about the way people thought and sort of thoughts in their thinking processes, and I know he read George Orwell a lot, and he was particularly fascinated by the Madoff scandal with the Ponzi scheme that collapsed in the United States in late 2008. He was fascinated by how this guy managed to dupe so many people, and and so many intelligent people with so many intelligent advisors. And then he was, when the hearings were going on in the U.S. Senate or Congress, I can't remember which, he downloaded all the testimony and he was poring over it, and he was absolutely, he brought it round and he had underlined all the bits and about how the person had exposed them and how the Security and Exchange Commission had just ignored it. That was Lachlan. He had long before this oil well spill in the Gulf of Mexico, Lachlan was fascinated by BP, the big oil company, and its safety culture. He dug up some events that happened he researched into events that happened in Texas City, in Texas in the early 2000s, where a petrochemical plant had suffered an explosion and fatalities. And Lachlan had dug up all the testimony and the evidence and the counter evidence and studied it a lot. And he was well aware of the British petroleum safety culture and how their then chairman, Lord Brown, had managed to escape a prison term. So I'm sure that this disaster in the Gulf, Lachlan would have had a lot of information dug up about that by now. But he was a rounded individual. He was quite a well-rounded individual. He maintained a website full of many details about Deep River and area. And one of the first times I actually met him after the squash wall walk down was at the Deep River Yacht and Tennis Club one early spring morning, and he was out there with his camera, and I thought he'd be doing the usual things like taking photographs of the river and the boats and the scenery. But no, he was taking photographs of the local plants, the flora and fauna, so that he could put those onto the botanical section of his website. So he was a man of many aspects. But he liked to relax too. Apparently, he was a great fan of the television series Father Ted. But for some reason or other, I don't know how we've never discussed this, because I didn't find out about this interest of his till after he had left us. So that's a pity, because that is one of my favorite TV shows too. Lachlan relaxed. Well, he had an old albacore sailing dinghy, and he just loved that old dinghy. And one of his favorite things to do was on a day with the wind blowing directly across the river, was he would just sail along up the river in a gentle breeze, and he would have just sit at the back of the boat, and he would have sort of one leg up on the bench and his other on the tiller, and his tilly had a white tilly hat, and he would have that down over his eyes. And I was crewing for him, and sometimes I was actually worried that he'd fallen asleep there at the back. But no, he hadn't. He would keep going. And he could do that for hours, although he didn't mind it if it got into rougher conditions. And I can remember, I think it was maybe the first year that he was here and doing sailing, and we entered into the July the 1st regatta. And it was all right to start with, but then, I don't know, maybe half an hour into the regatta, some major squalls came down the river, and we got blown harder and harder against the Quebec shore. We were the only boat that didn't capsize, which he found quite intriguing, but we got blown harder and harder against the Quebec shore, and it became more and more difficult to come about and come through the wind and get out. And I remember Melbourne's face, and it was sort of really grim, and his teeth were like this, and he was holding onto the ropes, and for some reason a phrase of an old sea shanty came into my mind, and I started to sing it to him, and it goes like this. Well, the chorus goes like this. It goes, haul away, you rolling kings, heave away, haul away. Haul away, you'll hear me sing, we're bound for South Australia. And he looked at me and started to laugh. And then he picked up, he knew, and I was amazed, he actually knew the words, and he started singing, you know, in South Australia I was born, heave away, haul away. In South Australia, round Cape Horn, we're bound for South Australia. And I think that was about the most of us, but either of us knew the words of that song. But anyways, I know that Melbourne is in Victoria and not South Australia, but I think that is a good place to end this talk. Thank you.